Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
I'm glad this is the last year I'm going to have to make a DeShaun Watson contract restructure explained video, because it feels like every year DeShaun Watson restructures that contract, and every year people, even though they've been through this multiple times, even though they've witnessed the restructure and all their fears about the restructure not be true, have the same reaction as if it's the first time they've ever heard of a contract restructure. Now, first, let's talk about what a contract restructure is and what it isn't, most importantly. What a contract restructure is basically moving guaranteed money down the line when it comes to accounting for it on the salary cap. The reason why contract restructures being agreed to is not that strange of a thing is because it really doesn't affect the player that much. It doesn't change how much money that player is making. It just changes how soon they get the money, and players are okay getting the money a little bit sooner. So for DeShaun Watson, it's not even that big of a deal. I think because of the dummy year that they added to his contract last year, that means that they can kind of just do this without even having him to have to agree to it, which is why I think this has been announced in like March, when it usually the contract restructure gets announced in like July. So I think this is like an automatic restructure kind of situation, right? I think this happened with Miles's contract as well. What it is not is an extension. What it is not is any kind of declaration of DeShaun Watson's ability to play football. What it is not is simply just kicking the can down the road to kick the can down the road, right? A lot of times people talk about the salary cap as if it's a credit card or as if it's debt, right? So people would talk about, well, we're just pushing the can down the road for later. But that's a flawed analogy, because debt accumulates interest, which makes borrowing money more expensive, especially if we're talking about regular old credit card debt, right? Like the interest is what makes that money not free. It makes it expensive. It's either 7% rate of return on your balance or whatever it is, right? But that's why you have to be careful with how much you kick down the road in your personal finances, because if you put something off till next year, you're going to accumulate interest, which is going to make that thing more expensive year in and year out, as long as you're still paying for it. That's how most people view the salary cap, but that's a flawed way of viewing it. It's not like your personal finances. It's not like your credit card. It's like if your credit card gave you reverse interest, which means moving things down the road actually benefits you because it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper monetarily, because you're getting percentages back from interest. That's kind of how the salary cap works, because the salary cap has consistently, over the last few years, risen with revenues. The reason that the salary cap rises with revenues is in the CBA. The NFL basically splits their revenues in half, and then the other half goes to the salary cap, right? So that's how the salary cap gets determined. The NFL made like $10 billion last year, and that revenue is based on the TV deals that they have signed, right? All of those things which are constant and constantly accelerating each year. So it's a pretty safe bet, while the NFL is in its current television agreements, and even if they're up for a new one, that usually can explode the salary cap, because the NFL is in a position where they're an incredibly valuable entity and going to get more money each time they re-up for TV deals. But since the NFL is locked into a really good TV deal, that means that they're basically a lock to raise in revenues every year, right? And that's why this is a good strategy, right? I know some people are like, well, they're worried about the state of the world and all of that. But the reality is, unless there is another pandemic or something more drastic than the pandemic, which if there is, we probably got bigger things to worry about than the Cleveland Browns salary cap situation. The NFL salary cap is likely going to rise every year at a percent of about like 7 or 8% a year, right? That's what it's consistently been. So when you put money off and the salary cap is rising, the money, the percentage of that money that's going to be taking up your cap is going to go down. So let's look at DeShaun's contract, for example, and how his contract kind of exhibits this, right? If you just split up the DeShaun Watson's $230 million contract when he signed it in 2022, and you split it into 5 equal parts, so $46 million a year for 5 seasons. The $46 million a year in his first season in 2022 would have taken up 22% of the salary cap. The next season, that same $46 million would have taken up 21% of the salary cap. In 2024, that same $46 million would have taken up 18% of the salary cap. 2025, again, the same $46 million, only 17% of the salary cap. And in 2026, that would have taken up 15% of the salary cap. It's the same exact amount of money. It's just the more time goes on, the salary cap rises, the less $46 million is worth as far as a percentage of your salary cap. Now, this is something that the Browns have used to their advantage when it comes to DeShaun Watson's contract. See, you'll notice when we talk about the devastating effects of the Watson contract, they're in specific areas, right? The commitment to DeShaun Watson is from 2022 to 2024. You can argue set the team back, not being able to move on. But I would argue the area where the Deshaun Watson trade hurts you the most is simply in the trade itself, right? The draft assets you lost to get Deshaun Watson, right? The 3 first-round picks, the 3rd round pick, the 5th round pick that you lost. All of those things are what hurt the Cleveland Browns the most when it came to the Deshaun Watson trade. The salary cap impact, despite the fact that this contract is certified horrible, there's no way around it. The Deshaun Watson contract is a horrific contract. It is a really, really bad contract. It's arguably the worst contract signed of all time. But have you noticed that the Deshaun Watson contract hasn't really affected the Cleveland Browns' ability to maintain their own players? Like, think about all the years you've been hearing about the Cleveland Browns. They're gonna be in salary cap hell. Right? We've heard this for years. Oh, they're going to have to let Myles Garrett walk because they're in salary cap hell. They're going to have to let Denzel Ward walk because they're in salary cap hell. They're going to have to let Joe Bitonio walk because they're in salary cap hell. But yet the Browns have avoided salary cap hell. They've been able to keep Denzel Ward. They've been able to keep Myles Garrett. They've been able to keep Joe Bitonio. Hell, they've even been able to throw some extensions around, right? When JOK came up, they were able to give him a little bit of bread. When Grant Delpit came up, they were able to give him some bread. Alex Wright came up, they were able to give him some bread. The Browns haven't lost a single player that they've drafted or brought in involuntarily. Also, I would like to point out that the Cleveland Browns are in a situation where they have salary cap space and money to spend this season. Like, they can spend like $80 to $90 million of annual average salary this season. And they're probably going to have more money open up next season, the season after that. They're actually not in a terrible spot now, then, or going forward when it comes to the salary cap. Everybody that the Cleveland Browns have let walk over the last few years is because they did not want them on the team anymore. They have not been forced to do anything with the roster because of the salary cap, despite all the hysteria you hear about the Browns being in salary cap hell, because they're not in salary cap hell, because salary cap hell is not real if you know how to manage your salary cap situation. And the way that the Browns avoided all of the consequences of being in salary cap hell is how they structured DeShaun Watson's contract, the constant restructurings, moving money down the line, adding a dummy year. All of this has made it so that DeShaun Watson in any given year has never taken up a significant portion of the salary cap, which has allowed them to maneuver even though they're dealing with one of the worst contracts of all time. I'm having too much fun with the soundboard. I know. But that's real. I'm just so happy to have it back. But that's why. Like, think about what I said there, right? When I was going through the percentages, DeShaun Watson in 2022, if you would have just taken his contract straight up, 22% of the salary cap. 2023, 21% of the salary cap. 2024, 18% of the salary cap. 2025, 17. 2026, 15. The way the Browns have structured DeShaun Watson's contract is that they're never eating more than 15% of the cap in any given year. So that lowest number here for the salary cap that the Browns could have eaten, which was 15 if they just took it straight up, that's the maximum, not the minimum. That's the maximum of what they ate during this DeShaun Watson situation. Jack Duffin has done great work on this. I'm going to put a screenshot of how this breaks down right now. Basically, by spreading it out, right, 4% that first year, 8% that next year, 11%, 13, 15, 11, 15%. It never rose over 15%. So I know a lot of you guys are hearing, oh, well, his cap number is going to be ginormous next year. It's going to be like $86 million. Well, what the Browns are going to do is post June 1st cut DeShaun Watson. And when they post June 1st cut DeShaun Watson, that's going to spread the cap hit of his loss over the next 2 seasons and make it so that it's 35 the first year, which is only going to be 11% of the salary cap, and then 53 the year after, which is 15. So by the time you get to 2029, you're completely hands washed of the DeShaun Watson contract. So that is how that works. That is why it is that they restructured DeShaun Watson, and that's how the Browns have benefited from this, right? Every time I have this conversation, there are people who don't think it benefits the Cleveland Browns or think it would have benefited the Cleveland Browns to just eat the contract straight up. But understand, if they would have ate that contract straight up, they wouldn't have been able to re-sign a lot of the players that they drafted over the last few years that were up during the Watson contract, right? Like, they were able to re-sign those guys because of the maneuvering of this deal, because it's still the worst contract of all time. Like, it's not a good contract, but because they were able to manage it properly, it didn't devastate them in the other ways that the Watson trade devastated you, right? There's no maneuvering around the draft pick stuff other than trying to compensate for it once you get your draft picks back. And that's why we feel the hit with the offensive side of the roster, because you didn't have 3 years of first round picks. You didn't have a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick because they all went towards DeShaun Watson, and DeShaun Watson has netted you a player that's probably not going to be active during game days this year. Another thing I would like to point out that's made obvious by the clear, what do they call it? Telegraphing of DeShaun Watson's contract and how the Browns are going to handle this. The Browns have telegraphed this very loudly for anybody paying attention, that this is basically going to be the year where they just let him sit on the roster, and then they're going to post June 1st cut him after the season. This is what they've been telling us they're going to do for a very long time here with the Watson contract, especially after 2023. So since that's the case, I want to be clear here. It's very, very unlikely that DeShaun Watson becomes the starter next year. The idea of them starting a quarterback for the whole year that they're gonna post June 1st cut regardless. Like the way that the contract is structured with the dummy years, I need people to be clear about this. There is 0% that DeShaun Watson's contract extends past this year. He's gonna be post June 1st cut this year regardless. He'd go out there, throw for 40 touchdowns. He's gonna get post June 1st cut. So they have no benefit in playing DeShaun Watson because all that can happen is it puts him in a tricky situation. So, and the reason he's going to get post June 1st cut no matter what, his contract, because they added the dummy year, has what's called a poison pill, which is a clause in the contract that nobody is ever going to keep. It's just like it's like saying if DeShaun Watson is on the roster after March 1st, 2028, then he gets $100 million in extra bonuses or some shit like that. It's called a poison pill to make sure whoever's in charge cuts DeShaun, right? Like it's a poison pill. That's literally what they call it. So because the poison pill's already in the contract, he's going to be a free agent after this year. He's going to get cut. Like, that's going to be the future for DeShaun Watson. It makes no sense for the Cleveland Browns to play him this year. Realistically, what it makes sense for the Cleveland Browns to do is have him be the emergency third-string quarterback. And then that's on top of the fact that DeShaun Watson physically, again, do I got to walk through this? How many times do I got to walk through this? He tore his ACL twice already. Then he breaks his throwing shoulder, comes back, breaks his throwing shoulder more severely in 2023, comes back from that injury, does not look remotely physically the same from an athletic standpoint as far as running the football or from a throwing standpoint. From throwing standpoint, he looked terrible. So he's already physically diminished, and he tore his Achilles twice. Also, on top of all of that, DeShaun Watson had to recover from a 700-day layoff between his starts in Houston and his starts in Cleveland. And it was obvious when he was in Cleveland, he never recovered from that 700-day layoff. Also, the cases seemed to have a mental toll on him to where he never recovered his play. And then on top of that 700-day layoff, DeShaun Watson, if he plays again this year, will likely have another 700-day layoff from October of 2024 when he tore his Achilles the first time to whenever he's on the field to at this 2026 season, which would be over a 700-day layoff. So he hasn't recovered from the first 700-day layoff. He has another 700-day layoff to come back from. The writing is on the wall. He was already physically diminished in 2024. It does not look like he's going to have much left in the tank. Even if Todd Monken wants to play this man, he's going to be heavily incentivized to not do it. The writing is on the wall that this is just going to be an awkward year where DeShaun Watson sits there and he's probably going to be emergency third-string quarterback because physically he's probably only capable of being emergency third-string quarterback. And I would be honest with you, if he is the emergency third-string quarterback, that's not a guarantee. He might just be inactive on game days with no designation to be the emergency third-string quarterbacks. And the Browns just might eat it all year and carry 4 quarterbacks. That's the reality of the situation. That's what's going to happen with DeShaun Watson. That's what they've been telling us is going to happen with DeShaun Watson for quite some time. And that's the reality of it. This is why every time somebody writes an article about DeShaun Watson potentially factoring into the starting role or acting as if DeShaun Watson's going to be a serious part of the quarterback competition this year, I roll my eyes because he's not. He's very obviously not, unless he miraculously recovers from all the things that we stated and the team is okay with letting somebody start who they have a poison pill going forward in the contract for. It's not very likely, So all of those things considered, it's just the reality of it. And that's what the restructure means. That's why you should pay attention to it. And this is why the Cleveland Browns have done it. Again, for all the damage the DeShaun Watson trade did because the Browns didn't have the draft resources available to them over that time period with DeShaun, and they're trying to dig themselves out of it. And that's why the Browns are prioritizing getting extra first-round picks and extra second-round picks, because they want to recoup as much of that top 50 talent onto this team over the next 3 years to try to get back to where they were. But that's why that part's hurt them, and that's why the Browns' draft strategy has been as aggressive in trading back or getting assets as it's been. That being said, the financial part of this, the financial consequences to signing DeShaun to the
Worst quarterback contract of all time?
it hasn't been significant. You've been able to keep all your young players. Like, name me the player that the Browns wanted to keep that the salary cap stopped them from keeping. You can't name one because it doesn't exist. Every guy that they let walk, they wanted to let walk. If they wanted to keep those guys, they could have very easily kept them because of how they structured the cap. This is one of the parts where Andrew Berry's kind of salary cap expertise and the people who have run the cap for the Browns shines, because this has been able to allow the Cleveland Browns to kind of skate past some of the more severe parts of signing DeShaun Watson to the
Worst quarterback contract of all time.
That's all I got to say. Just wanted to put that out there because this comes up every year. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.